help identify, you know, things that aren't yet diagnosable. So as a nutritionist, I don't diagnose and I don't treat. The main thing I do is educate and point out and help to make suggestions and check in with people, hold them accountable to those changes. But they're a little bit more clinical, let's say, than what you're doing.
Right. So you specialize in functional wellness and you have an emphasis on gut health, I understand.
And that is oftentimes because disease is gut and it's very foundational. And although people say, what do my headaches have to do with my gut, that kind of thing. And you have to start there in order to be able to have good health. And it's the foundation to good health.
All right. So I messed up pressing the record button for the people in the replay, but they did hear most of what you do. I just wanted to reiterate what I did real quick before we jumped into the first question. We'll talk about probiotics, I believe, and pre, post, and all that. Anyhow, so sorry, I apologize for the recording. I'm Coach Fitbro J, and I deal in physique manipulation with an emphasis on deep health. Physique manipulation, it's just people want to tighten up and tone up, and physique manipulation isn't a sexy way of saying it, or it is a very sexy way of saying it. So I like physique manipulation. Lose body fat, build a little bit of a base of muscle, get tightened and toned. That's what I do. And I have an emphasis on deep health. I coach the whole person, mental, stress, recovery, everything like that. Now, Tiana, you specialize in gut health, okay? And I know that, I know the importance of gut health. It's very important because what is it that you say? We are what we eat. What was it that you said?
Yeah. So most people know the term "you are what you eat," and I elaborate on that to say you are what you, not just what you eat, but what you digest, absorb, and assimilate, into your cells. So it goes a lot deeper than you are what you eat. And we can take it one step further to say we're also not what we eat, but what we ate. So again, bigger picture and a deeper understanding of how that all works.
All right, so before we have everybody answer, I'm gonna ask some questions. We do have some questions, and I think we wanted to start off with about probiotics, to probiotic or not to probiotic. I mean, what are probiotics? There's prebiotics. I guess there's postbiotics, and then there's prebiotics. I mean, what's that all mean? And as far as your gut and everything else.
That it is a common question, and it's not. I'm not here to answer whether someone should or shouldn't with a probiotic, because of course it depends. But to give a better understanding of what probiotics are, so the probiotic word does refer to microorganisms, and if we're taking a probiotic through our food or through a supplement pill, what we're doing is we're introducing a bacteria, basically, and there are good and there are bad, and sometimes it's not just about good and bad, but everything needs to be in balance. So some of the things that may have been nicknamed, bad, as long as they're at a manageable level, it's totally fine, normal and natural. So when people take probiotics, they're introducing this flora, the bacteria into
The good bacteria.
Well, yeah, hopefully the good, yeah, good bacteria into the digestive system. And so again, people will take that as a capsule, a supplement, but you can also get it naturally from foods that have been fermented by bacteria. So, we're familiar with things like yogurt. Yogurt should and can have probiotics in them because the milk is fermented by those bacteria. So they're naturally present. You can have a naturally fermented sauerkraut, not the kind that's pasteurized in a jar on the shelf, but the kind that sits in the refrigerated section that is naturally fermented, not soaking in vinegar. It's a
Oh, so you can't grab the sauerkraut off the shelf at the grocery store and expect to get benefits out of it like that.
one that's shelf stable and has been pasteurized. Pasteurized means it has been heated to a certain temperature, and then the pressure keeps it fresh on the shelf. So the one that you just grab off the regular shelf generally no. That's usually, if you look at the label, has things like vinegar to give it its flavor. The same thing with jarred pickles. But if you go to the refrigerator section and you get pickles that are naturally fermented or sauerkraut that is naturally fermented, that's giving you probiotics because you're getting the benefit of the bacteria that fermented that food. Same thing with kombucha. People are familiar with kombucha. It's a fermented tea. They actually add bacteria and some yeast into the tea and they let it sit with a culture and it ferments. And that fermentation is, full of mostly beneficial bacteria. That's probiotics.
Okay. So how do you know whether you should everybody take a probiotic, or I mean, what's the general recommendation for that?
Well, I would say most people could benefit from some, but there's not just one general answer for that because you do have situations where someone may actually have an overgrowth and they may have an overgrowth in the wrong place of their digestive system, like higher up in the digestive system versus lower down in the lower part of the digestive system where they should be. And if you have an imbalance or you have an overgrowth in the wrong place, taking a probiotic might actually make you feel worse. So maybe it's appropriate, but not yet, not until you balance out the system. So that's why there's not one answer to, everybody should take a probiotic. So I'd say most people probably could benefit, but then the next question will be, well, what kind? There's 400 trillion different bacteria, you can have in your system. So, those are questions that I answer on a more individual basis because I want to know more about the person, more about their diet, more about their symptoms, and there are some bacteria, some probiotics that are targeted for specific conditions that are evidence-based. There's research behind them that says this particular probiotic is beneficial for XYZ, like the skin or for eradicating an infection. So there's really a big world of probiotics out there.
Okay, so probiotic is introducing hopefully the good bacteria into your system, and hopefully you don't have an overgrowth. How would you know that? I guess you'd be having symptoms and digestive issues.
Yeah, most people are having some kind of a symptom, and then we'll do a further investigation to find out if there is an overgrowth and etc. Sometimes there can be an overgrowth, even the beneficial guys. So it's not always the pathogenic one, but everything is about balance. And then if it's in the wrong place, there are protocols, regimens individuals go through with a provider like myself, or maybe even with their medical doctor.
And then, so that's probiotics. Now, what's the deal with prebiotics?
All right. So what is prebiotics? So the simplest way to explain a prebiotic is it's food for the probiotic. Think of it as a garden. You're planting these seeds in a way, and now you're providing, fertilizer or food. So the bacteria in your system do need to be nourished, right? Because they need to grow and need to proliferate. That's what they're there for. They you want them happy and growing and healthy. You don't want them to die off. So the prebiotics are basically the food for the probiotic. So some examples of prebiotics are going to be vegetable fibers. There are some vegetables that have, let's say, more of this prebiotic than others, but asparagus, certain root vegetables. I mean, really vegetables in general, and vegetable fibers. But so there's a whole list of things that are considered more of a prebiotic than other things. But I just, the simplest thing is just eat more vegetables and fruits. But some are higher than others.
Wow, and it seems like you really have to pay attention on an individual basis because you don't want to use a prebiotic and a probiotic when you have an overgrowth, and you could create an imbalance, it seems.
Yeah, in general, like food fibers, are going to feed like the beneficial bacteria. But if someone has symptoms, and those symptoms are usually bloating and gas, right? There may be a period of time where they're not eating certain healthy foods, let's say, because they have to put things more into balance. But that should never be a forever diet. That is more of temporarily, let's not encourage these bacteria. Again, some of them are just good bacteria, but in the wrong place. So there may be a time where you don't want to feed them, let's say. But in general, all of these what we call prebiotics are beneficial, to feed our food.
So you could actually get prebiotics from the food that you eat if you chose to, versus taking a pill.
You don't have to, that's the thing, you don't have to take a prebiotic. You can. There are supplements out on the marketplace that are called prebiotics to help feed the probiotics. And that might be someone who has really decimated their microbiome. They've just killed all the weeds and they've killed all the flowers along with them. Maybe after a course of antibiotics, as an example, might be a time where you're trying to bring back some of that healthy flora, and then you want to encourage its growth. Again, very individual.
And the last question I had about before I let everybody else ask is this post-biotics. I've never heard of post-biotics before. I've just literally just heard of them.
It's not necessarily something that you take. So again, it's different than the probiotic. It's not necessarily you're going to find in a bottle. So the postbiotic part is substances that your probiotics, that your bacteria makes, that's beneficial. So the bacteria in our gut actually make vitamins. They make short chain fatty acids that nourish the environment in that area. They make, they help break down hormones. So there's, different roles that the bacteria play. And so the postbiotics are the things that they make. So like I said, the short chain fatty acids are something that are critical to the health of the microbiome, and your healthy bacteria make those.
Wow, thanks. I didn't know a lot of that information and the nuances of it all. And when people hear probiotic, oh, let me just go eat some yogurt, or let me go grab a pill off the shelf. All these things you got to pay attention to, or should pay attention to, make a difference.
Some people may not even need to, because if they're eating a really good mixed diet of whole foods and they haven't lived a lifestyle that kills off the bacteria in your body, that they may have just been bubbling along, doing all the right things in lifestyle and diet, and they never have to supplement. So,
Kind of like everybody in their 20s, they just lose weight. Yeah.
I don't know, because some of the things that can disrupt the balance are, alcohol and oral contraceptives. And so I would say not necessarily about being in your 20s, right?
Oh,
So,
good point.
so many things that kill off our microbiome. I mean, antimicrobial soaps. I mean, so many things that we do. The pesticides in our food. So you might have a better chance as a youngster if you're starting out with a good microbiome. But some of the challenges are early on lifestyle factors. In fact, it can start at birth. So baby born by cesarean doesn't have the benefit of getting the microbiome from their mother. They're probably more likely to get the microbiome from the people who work in the
the nursery.
Right. And so, then there's the difference between breastfeeding and bottle feeding. So a lot of things can start right from day one. The baby might be born with a somewhat, I don't know if they're really born with a sterile gut, but that's when you're first getting your beneficial bacteria.
Interesting. All about pre, post, and probiotics. Does anybody have any questions since we hogged the front of this Zoom? Anybody? Take a second while I look through these questions that we have here. Oh, you're on mute. Yep.
So is there a time, because like you were saying that the prebiotics are actually the food for the What's it called?
Probiotic.
The probiotic. The prebiotic is the food for the probiotic. Is there a better, like, is it better to take them together? Is it better to take them at separate times? Is there an order that they should be in, or?
Well, again, that's taking them to begin with. So again, it's different if you're thinking of this as taking as in a supplement, right? So certain probiotics should be taken with a meal. Like it's kind of like they get incorporated into your food. In fact, some of them, the better way, like if it's a spore-based probiotic, you open up the capsule on your food, or you just take it with food. But when we're talking about prebiotics, hopefully we're getting them from food, right? So we're getting them from our vegetables. But if you were taking it as a supplement, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you just stir it in water, drink it down, or take capsules. It'll make its way down to the gut where it needs to be there for feeding. So again, different if you're thinking about taking it in as food, which is hopefully how we're all doing it. Does that answer that question?
Thank you.
Aside from fermented foods, what naturally occurring foods would have probiotics in them?
Well, so since we're talking about bacteria here, you know, it is really something that you would purposefully do, which means it's a fermented food, right? But we will get things naturally from our environment depending on how we live. So for example, if you have your own organic garden, you know, you're naturally getting things from the dirt. Most of us don't play in the dirt anymore. Right? So we're really picking things up from our environment. Yeah, so that's another reason why we may need some help in this area.
Makes sense. And does anybody else have any questions about probiotics, postbiotics?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, I can hear. We can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was muted. Hi everybody. I'm sorry I was late. I'm just coming from the gym, so I'll have to rewatch the first like 15 minutes. I'm curious, how can I find out more information about, because I've been sick a lot in my life, and you made a comment about, you know, it makes a difference. Like I was born cesarean and I did not breastfeed. And my mother thinks, you know, that could be why I'm sick so much, because I didn't get, you know, my dad thinks, one of them thinks it. Like, how could I get more information on that? Like what I could do to help my system.
So that is one piece of the puzzle. So when you speak to a healthcare provider, ideally, they want to look at all of these pieces. This is the whole, you know, detective part, right? So, for example, if I'm doing an assessment, I have, you know, a 5-page history. I have a timeline, right? So I may ask questions such as, you know, were you born cesarean? Did you take a lot of antibiotics as a child? Did you have allergies? What kind of food did you eat growing up? What kind of environment did you live in? You know, these are puzzle pieces. So, you know, let's say you grew up next to an apple orchard and it wasn't organic. Well, you got a lot of toxins coming in from that environment, right? So there's all kinds of puzzle pieces. And then as the nutrition detective, you know, we're using that information plus your timeline, like when did your symptoms start? You know, how did you address it, if at all? You know, so, and then the diet, lab work, if appropriate, and all of those are pieces that help us figure out, okay, maybe when did this start? You know, how do we start to unravel what's going on in the body? You know, and the gut part, you know, why I'd say I specialize in the gut, if you want to say that, I mean, functional wellness, starting with the gut, is because it's so foundational. Because if you're not properly digesting and breaking down your food, you can't extract the nutrients. And even though there's a lot of supplements that we can take to fill in some of the gaps, it's never going to work as well as the food. Does that answer that? Give you some insight to that? And it's not an answer per se, but more information on the process.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so we can talk about that.
And I see Helen just came on. Helen, do you have any questions about probiotics, the prebiotics? That's what we were talking about in the beginning. And you're muted, in case you don't know. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, there's a little delay sometimes. Anyhow, all right. So one of the other questions that I wanted to touch base on at the very surface level, because we want to keep this another like 5 minutes or so. Organic. Is there really a difference? And again, we could talk all night long about this one subject, but just a surface level. We will touch base and get back to this again. But surface level, organic.
Okay.
You can go ahead. You go first, Tiana, and let me know. I'll kind of tell you what I do.
I'm just going to say, since we're talking about the microbiome, why don't I just start by linking it? So what is something that we know about organic versus non-organic or conventional is the other term, right? So conventional typically means that pesticides, most likely a monocrop, same thing being planted over and over. Organic, there's certain regulations if it's a certified organic or if it's called biodynamic. So you're not going to have chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers. Usually there's crop rotation. So from just referring back to the microbiome, in a non-organic vegetable, you may not be getting as many nutrients, but you could be getting a package of those pesticides. That's part of what's killing off the good guys. But like that's just the start.
And I believe apples are very high on that list. Strawberries are very high on that list for fruit. And I think veggies, spinach has been in the top for the longest time. And I buy all those, all that produce I buy organic,
So
those particular ones.
those are referring to pesticide residues. So anyone who wants to know the year's list from the Environmental Working Group, you go to
EWG.org, yeah.
they will give you the top offenders from their research. So they have the Dirty Dozen and then the Clean 15. And from a budgeting standpoint, if you have a limited budget and you're trying to maximize your dollar, it certainly makes sense to use those lists as a starting point. But that is really just talking about pesticide residues. It's not talking about what is in the soil, even if the residues are low. And I do believe that there is at least a potential for a big difference in the soil. So your carrot is not going to have, grown in organic soil and grown in conventional, may not have the same level of nutrients. And they have done studies and they have looked at today's carrot, today's apple, and they've compared it to the 40s and the 50s. And unfortunately, the nutrient levels are lower. But there's also a big differential in, okay, well, where is it grown? What were the weather conditions? What was how are they taking care of the land? So unfortunately, an apple from one place isn't always the same as an apple from another. So, eating things in season, rotating is part of that philosophy as well.
Right, yeah. I see. So the other thing I've heard about organic versus non-organic is like milk from cows. You don't really have to have organic milk. You really want to look for the hormones that the cows are given or not given. It passes through to you.
Well, again, going back to one of my first statements, you're not just what you eat, but what you eat ate. So let's just talk about milk, right? So the cow that produces the milk has to eat a diet. So it's not just about organic versus non-organic, is what substance are they actually eating? Are they eating hay and grass, or are they being fed corn and soy or pellets like that they make from who knows what, right? So there is a difference in the nutrients that end up in the meat because there's not necessarily omega-3 and vitamin A in those pellets. But in the grass, the cow has the ability to change grass nutrients into nutrients that the human body can utilize. Whereas if we eat grass, we can't get the nutrients from that. Can't really digest it. They have a specialized digestive system in order to turn that grass into nutrition that we can digest and utilize. So when you're looking for something like milk, it's not just about organic, it's really pastured and organic, right? So it's about what is the natural diet of that animal, and that's the kind of meat you want to buy. Whatever is natural for that animal. So for farm-raised salmon, if they're actually eating little shrimps, if they're farmed, but they're eating good quality little baby shrimps, at least you're a step in the right direction. But, most of the time they're eating soy pellets. So you're not getting what you think you're getting.
Then I heard they taught them how to eat corn, believe it or not. Oh, horrible. Anyhow, does anybody have any questions, surface level questions anyway, or anything on organic versus non-organic? If not, I'm going to open up the questions for anything at all. Anything at all. And if we don't answer tonight, I'm going to write it down, just like all the other questions that I have written down that were asked in the post. Does anybody have any questions?
Can I ask that you put the that website that you said to look up the organic? Can you put that in the comments?
Sure. ewg.org. I will put that in the comments.
Thank you.
Yep, clean 15, dirty dozen. And yeah, it's just a shame about the whole nutrient thing and the soil and whatnot. I mean, it really goes deep. I mean, no pun intended, but that's rough. All right, if nobody has any more questions, we're going to sign off.
Thank you.
No questions? All right, you're welcome, Chris. And thank you, everybody, for showing up. Thank you, Tiana. Tiana is going to be a reoccurring guest. I think we're working on the cadence of like once a month or something like that.
Good.
All right, yeah, so she's in the group too. So if there's any questions that you guys have, just go ahead and post it in there. But other than that, I'd like to give you guys back the rest of your evening, and thanks for joining us. See you guys later.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.